What's up, mamas? Right now we have Kim West, and she's known as the Sleep Lady, and for good reason. She's been on national news sources. She's also been on several talk shows talking about the topic of sleep and our children and our babies. It's something we all want to know, and she is a phenomenal speaker. She's been on the Mom Conference before, so I'm so excited to have you back, Kim. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. Happy
You
to
bet.
be here.
So let's jump right into it. So we're going to be talking about how to pick a sleep coaching method. So if you do a Google search, there are so many different types of sleep coaching methods out there.
Mhm.
How do you pick the best one for your child?
Yeah. And that's kind of like one of my little sleep myths busters is that there's really not, 15 or 30 or even 5 sleep coaching methods. They really all fall under 3 categories, right? So the first one is extinction, meaning put your baby in their crib or bed, leave the room, don't go in all night long, period, right? That's supposed to be the most successful because we, the parent, can't mess it up by going in and doing too much, right? But, most of us can't stomach it, right? That's something to think about. And not to mention, some babies and children can cry much longer than others.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one method, extinction. The other one, which is probably about 95 to 98% of the sleep books out there, is what's called graduated extinction. So here in the United States, it was made popular by Dr. Richard Ferber, and that's put your baby in a crib and leave, and then you can go in and check on them in timed increments, maybe like 5 minutes and 10 minutes and 15 minutes, with the idea that as you give them longer amounts of time, they'll eventually learn how to put themselves to sleep. Where all the differences are in this column, in these, 95% of the sleep books, are whether you can, for instance, pick up the baby to calm them down when you go in for a check, whether you can touch them, speak to them, and whether you should extend the time every time they wake or every day, right? So all little variations. But I really tell parents, like, I promise you, there's no magic in, for instance, how many minutes you wait before you go in. The minutes are to control you, the parent, right? And so that's why, again, it's like pick the approach that you can follow through with consistently. I'll give you a couple more tips about that. Then the third method, which there are fewer books on, is what's called in behavioral science fading, but I like to specify it and call it parental fading, because there's another thing called bedtime fading that is not really a sleep training method. So in fading, you put the child into the crib and you stay. And you either, in like the Baby Whisperer does pick up, put down, or Elizabeth Pantley, No Cry Sleep Solution, and I would have you stay and then slowly move away. So in my particular method, the Sleep Lady Shuffle, you stay and you offer physical and verbal reassurance. And you do that each night for 3 nights, and then you start to move away and doing less and less as your child is incorporating the skill. So those are the sort of 3 general methods, if you will. So then the parent says, well, how am I going to know, which one is the right one for me to do? So I usually say, well, what's your parenting philosophy? What's your child's temperament? And what's your temperament, right? Like if you feel maybe that you're not as patient, or you're super tear sensitive and you can't tolerate any tears, or maybe both parents are very tear sensitive, that happens too, and can't handle crying. Those are the methods then that I think, or those are the parents, that I think should stay in the room and do more parental fading. So remember, speed is correlated with the amount of crying, right? If you want to go super fast, then you're going to see more crying because you're basically, right? You change things and your child doesn't know why,
Right.
And if they're pre-verbal, they're going to cry. And as I like to say, and if they're verbal, they're going to cry and have words of protest for you. So I think it's figuring that out. So what can I follow through with consistently? And let's say you don't know, or as a couple, you're not on the same page, which that happens too. Then I would always recommend that you start more gradually, like by staying in the room. And then as you get to know your kid and you know yourself in the process and you feel like, I think he or she's getting this, then you can move out. And I find that when parents do that, they tend to be more consistent because they're like, oh, yes, you know what? I saw that their crying wasn't because I was abandoning them or whatever our horrible thoughts are that we have. It's because they're protesting. And I really saw my little baby start to, hum or suck their hand or do things to soothe themselves. And I really think they got it and I can move out.
So would you say, is it accurate to say picking your sleep training method has more to do with the parent than with the child?
Or maybe the match, right? The interaction between both. Yeah. But I don't think it should be exclusively one or the other because, we're not in a vacuum. We're a dyad, together.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Good to know. So how do you determine when is the best time to actually put your kid to bed?
Yeah. So some of this has to do with the age of your child. So let's say like with a 2-year-old, like your oldest, and let's say before COVID, when depending on where you are in the world, actually left the house and went to school.
Right.
I usually looked at what time do they have to be awake by. So let's say, the math's nice and easy with a 2-year-old. The 2-year-old needs on average 11 hours of sleep at night and 2 hours during the day. And let's say in order for them to be at preschool on time, they have to be awake at 7 a.m. That would mean that they should be asleep by 8 p.m. Not just starting the routine, but literally already lights are off and they've gone to sleep. So I call it do the math backwards to figure out bedtime. With littler babies, really honestly, bedtime is between 7 and 7:30 for a very long time. Probably at least a year and a half, sometimes 2. I mean, there's plenty of 2-year-olds who can go to bed at 7:30.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's actually when my son goes to bed, and it is fantastic. That is a great time, I think. It gives you a little bit more time for the parent to be alone with your spouse or whatever, get things done going at 7 o'clock.
And also have to realize, I know that it's hard for some parents to, they feel like, oh, I just got home from work, or, we live in an area where we like to stay out late or go out late and bring our children with us. But here's the thing we have to remember, our kids don't have the capability, and I know they're the anomalies, to go to bed late and sleep in until on average 7 or 8 years of age, right? So before then, we really need to follow that internal clock, that circadian rhythm, so we don't have our children get that infamous second wind, which will make it harder for them to go to sleep and stay asleep.
Those are awful nights right there. So what tips do you have for a parent of a toddler who still wakes up a few times in the night?
Yeah. So one of the things I would look at is, does that toddler, well, first of all, is that toddler going to bed early enough, right? Because as I just alluded to, a late bedtime can cause night waking and early rising. So an 18-month-old, again, 7 to 7:30 bedtime, and really 7 if they're not sleeping through the night. The other thing I would look at is, are they well napped? So between 15 and 18 months, a toddler goes from 2 naps to 1 nap. If this 18-month-old isn't sleeping through the night, I'd keep 2 naps until they are, and then, transition out of the morning. So, excuse me. So sorry about that.
It's all right.
Everybody's
real life
now.
I love it.
So nap deprivation, going to bed too late. And then the other thing is does that toddler know how to put him or herself to sleep independently at bedtime? Because if they don't have the skill there, they won't have it in the middle of the night, right? They won't know how to put themselves back to sleep. So those would be the factors. And if the first one is, well, no, I give my toddler, a bottle to sleep and I rock him or her to sleep, then I would start there, right? And that to me would mean it's time to sleep coach and to create a sleep coaching plan and have your toddler learn how to put themselves to sleep independently at bedtime.
You mentioned for babies, you can give them things like a lovey and different little tools that help them feel safe in their crib and help them stay asleep longer. What are some of those tools that you can give babies and toddlers to help them?
Well, some of it depends on their age. Again, I'm a proponent with our really little babies, like your 6-week-old, of swaddling and white noise. Those are wonderful tools to help with sleep and helping them stay asleep because, I'm sure you've seen your baby has the startle reflex.
Yeah.
So swaddling is very comforting. White noise too reminds them of the womb. So those are important things. You have to be careful, of course, with loveys and things that could be potentially unsafe for small babies.
Right.
So definitely, no crib bumpers and, flat surface, no pillows or things in the bed. But then when you feel comfortable with your baby's mobility and feel like, they could have a small lovey that doesn't have any parts that come off of it, and small enough that if it were to get on their face, they could push it away. And then honestly, a soothing bedtime routine. And I would say maybe for older kids, a toddler clock, love them, and a nightlight.
A toddler clock?
Yes.
What's a toddler clock?
Yeah, it's like a wake up light. So for instance, let's say your toddler or your 2-year-old was, waking up at 5:45 every day. You could have that light go off at 6. And every time he wakes up before 6 a.m., you would go to his room and say, shh, your wake up light's not on. Because usually now there's so many on the market, like let's say you had one that turns green and that means you can wake up and start your day. And then when it's another color, let's say blue or orange, then that means you have to stay in bed. Those are wonderful things, especially for kids in beds. And then I am a proponent of a dim night light, just for orientation. Our little kids have more fears and sometimes need that orientation when they wake up in the middle of the night.
That's good to know because there is a lot of conflicting things that you can read about night lights as well. And so that's good.
The idea is that it's dim and it's not too close to their bed.
Right. So you mentioned bedtime routines and the importance of those. What if you do a bedtime routine with your child and they just resist it? They don't want to do it.
Yeah.
What do you do then?
Well, I say this particularly about 2-year-olds. I know I keep saying 2-year-olds as an example, but
hey, I appreciate it.
Is that I often have moms say to me, "Oh, my 2-year-old's doesn't want to take a nap anymore," and I always think, I think that they go through a stage where they think that they don't need a nap anymore, but we know better, right? And so all we can do is provide the environment and the timing and that soothing pre-nap and pre-bedtime routine. And then we still put them in their crib, and it's not a negotiation. Or you can do, I shouldn't say or, and you could also offer options, right? But never is the option, you don't have to go to bed, right?
Right.
You want to wear your yellow pages or your blue pages? You want to read this book or do you want to read that book? And I also love to blame everything on the clock, not the sun, because then we're in trouble during the summer. So, look, if let's say bedtime is, 7:30, lights out is 7:30, and, they had extra playing in the tub, then you say, you know what, we don't have that much time left. We have like 10 minutes. So tonight we can only read one book. Because I know a lot of parents will go through, oh my gosh, he wants to read 7 books and then I get talked into more. And so that's why you just blame it on the clock.
Okay.
No, sorry, we only have time for one because it's, 7:30 is lights out. But you got to really stick with it, and you have to be consistent, because a little wobbling, right, on your part, and then they figure out like, oh, I push a little more. And because, that is what they're doing. They're trying to figure out what they have control over and what they don't.
Your kids are smarter than you think they are.
Oh,
So do you believe in a flexible bedtime, or like if your bedtime is 7:30, you put them down at 7:30?
I always feel like if I say, yes, I believe in a flexible bedtime, then, it's like one night it's 9, the next night it's 8. Here's the thing. If your child is sleeping well and taking, naps and sleeping through the night, like, you don't have a problem, right? If it's not broken, don't fix it. And can those children adapt like to a later night? Yes, they can. They can adapt much more easily than a child who's already sleep deprived.
Mm-hmm.
So I like to say maybe I'd say flexible bedtime, as long as the wiggle room's not too big.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what do you do if there's a 2-year-old that won't go to sleep because they have this fear of missing out? And my son does this only if someone's over at our house, and then it's time for him to go to bed, then he has a hard time. But I feel like there are some kids that just feel like they're missing out. What advice do you have for those parents?
I think that is hard, by the way, when you have guests over, particularly if you have a very social child or a very sensitive child, in like a sensory sensitive kid, it's harder for them. And they're just so, sorry for all this background noise.
I love it.
They're just, I guess this is part of that imperfect parenting, right?
Exactly. No, that's why I'm loving this. It goes right along with the theme.
But then there's, just the kids who, don't want to miss out because, they're just having so much fun with you. So that's why I really think it's helpful to make the atmosphere boring and be fully engaged. They say you and I should, I love this, who gets to do this? Piddle an hour before bedtime. Start to dim the lighting in your home, turn TVs off, screen time, do kind of mindless things like put away the laundry. Things do help us and tell our body to start to slow down. And I think that's why our routine is so helpful. Mm-hmm. I think these sensitive kids, you can't just run upstairs and plop them into bed.
Right.
They really need that routine. So pulling the shade down, maybe dimming the lights, picking out a quiet activity. And I really think if we, the parents, also have no devices during the bedtime routine too. And also for our children, it really, really helps. The routine is what tells our body, along with darkness, by the way, tells our body to secrete melatonin, that drowsy making hormone, to help us go to sleep.
That makes sense. Mm-hmm. And in your time sleep coaching, because you just mentioned, every child is different and they have different behavioral, I wouldn't even call them issues, but just different things that they do. When it comes to the routine, the bedtime routine, are there different things that are better for certain personality types and certain children? Or have you found in your sleep coaching that everything that you just said kind of works as a blanket for every type of child, just dimming the lights and doing the routine?
Some of those, some things like dimming the lights, pulling down the shades are true for every single one of us, because that's what triggers melatonin secretion, which is drowsy making hormone. So yes, to that. Where things can be different is some kids find a bath stimulating. Others end up finding it relaxing after, of course, you've gotten out of the bath and had the pajamas. Some kids find deep pressure soothing. Some kids, no, don't touch me, like that. Other kids want to sit in your lap and look at a book, and others want to lie on the floor or the bed with you. So those things I think are different depending on the type of, your child's temperament.
Yeah, that makes sense. So
Yeah.
what would be your number one takeaway that you would want moms and dads as parents to remember when it comes to sleep training your child?
Mm. Consistency is the secret sauce. And that includes then, therefore, picking the method that you feel like you can follow through with consistently, and that it's okay to reach out for support if you've either tried and failed or feel like you need that support. And I guess I'm going to add another one is it often takes more than 3 days. And for sure more than one. And I know we hear about all those parents who say, oh, my child like 5 minutes in one night and now they sleep through the night. That they have like excellent public relations managers.
Yeah.
So don't expect that. If it happens, I celebrate that with you, but don't expect it.
Have a little patience, have a little grace with yourself and your child.
Yes.
And if you're consistent, it'll all work out. I do have a question of up to what age do you do the bedtime routine?
That's such a great question because I've started this bedtime story that I'm going to put on my YouTube channel, and it's brought up all these conversations about reading picture books to your children. And there's an excellent research that talks about this psychologist who said she was studying all these adults who had a trauma, and she ended up, her studies ended up going way beyond the initial work. And she said to them, asked them, what was your most memorable childhood memory or event or thing?
Right.
And they all said, having a story told to me, or a picture book read with me.
Mm.
Yeah, by a caregiver, which is amazing. And so I asked my girls who are in their 20s, what do you think? And they said, absolutely, that they still to this day remember reading picture books with each other, even beyond when they could read. So I think always having a connection. Because think about it, even like when our kids get into latency age 7, 8, 9, 10, that thing, they have a lot going on that they need to practice, and even if it's just having something to talk about, to be grateful for before going to sleep, it's important. I really do think it's such a great time to connect with our kids. And sometimes it's when they tell you the most too.
Right. Ooh, I love that. That's incredible. So when you say picture book too, you're just talking any book, right, with pictures that you read to your child on a daily basis.
It's specifically picture books because it also helps with reading and imagination and putting images together with words. And there's lots of great research on that. Yeah.
Ooh, that's incredible. I love that. All right. So my final question for you is going to be, since the theme of this conference is Confessions of an Imperfect Mother, and you are a mother yourself, do you have any stories of a time you maybe screwed up a little bit? It could be with sleeping or anything else, but then everything turned out okay.
Yeah, for sure. Like how about today, right now, my goodness, not that this is a parenting moment. I think about this one story event with my younger daughter, who is very alert and very observant. And she was driving me crazy one afternoon, asking me the same question over and over and over and over again. I'm sure you can relate to this. And I got a little irritated, and I turned to her and I said, oh my gosh, Gretchen, have I somehow said yes after 20 no's? Like, why do you keep asking? Because of course I know that that's part of like behavioral science, right?
Right.
And she very thoughtfully looked at me and said, no, it's just that sometimes you forget that you said no. Oh my gosh. So it shows you, like, they pick up this stuff. They are watching us. And I had to really like stand up straight and be like, okay, well, that was my fault then. I'll try not to do that anymore. Plenty of examples, of course, just like the ones you listed in your emails of like horrible dinners and forgetting important things. And I've done.
Oh yeah. I love that so much. She shouldn't have told you that, because then you're going to be more vigilant to say no and stick with it.
Right. And of course, if she was a teenager, she would never have, but she was too young to know that she shouldn't have told.
I love that. Kim, thank you so much for taking the time and sharing some of your knowledge with us, and tell everybody where they can get more information on you and just your trainings and everything.
Yeah. Just go over to sleeplady.com at my website. I have hundreds and thousands of blog articles and resources. And of course, you can follow me on Instagram and Facebook at The Sleep Lady too.
All right. Awesome. Kim, thank you so much. We appreciate the time.
Thank you. Take care.
Hello, my name is Rich Christensen, and through the years of entrepreneurship and growing crazy businesses, I lost a view of what was really important. Through a series of really tender experiences, my mentor taught me you can replace anything in this world, but you cannot replace your family. So I made a dramatic pivot and started embedding deeply in my family some of the same principles that applied to business. My wife and I began very deliberately parenting. We looked for models, how not to mess our children up. There were really no good models to teach values, to entrench family unity, and to make sure that the values passed on in legacy to my children, and more importantly, my grandchildren and great-grandchildren. So like every great entrepreneur, I secretly created my own models. I was very hesitant to talk about it, but a few of my closest friends saw the impact that this was having on my children. I decided to take the processes that I used and create an online course so others could also work with their families to create tighter bonds, build confidence and self-esteem, while constructing a gorgeous legacy that they could live on past our lifetime. With this 5-part digital training series, you'll find the single most important lessons of thought leadership that I've ever created. There's 5 critical parts to this series, each with its very unique function. The first is symbols, creating unifying symbols that we all can touch to. Second is the doctrine, the guiding principles that we can tag and understand what the rules are. The third is the traditions or the rituals, where we actually formalize and we unite and show that we're unified with the values. The fourth, my favorite, the defining life events. The final section of this is the structure. What do the really wealthy families do to preserve their wealth and to pass on in the form of family banking? To pass on how you appropriately set up the will and how you embed your family constitution so that these values permeate and pass on. I can tell you firsthand that taking these steps to create a beautiful life for my family is the most important work that I've ever done, and also the most rewarding. I would invite you to learn some of these principles, unify your family, bond them, and take some of the guesswork out of this. And I'm going to provide you the framework to make that happen with this 30 years of life experiences. So join me, get your membership to build family legacies today.